Welcome to Exploration Radio. This week's episode deals with the concept of Wanderlust. It's not just another Jennifer Aniston movie, it's much more. Wanderlust is often described as an insatiable thirst for travel, culture, new people, or just the new in general. Wanderlust has driven many an explorer. We search out places where others haven't been and where others won't go. Our lives track like a photo album of some of the more exotic parts of our planet. But it's not all beer and Skittles. Our lives include a list of the shitholes of our planet, a list that doesn't even make the top 1,000 tourist destinations. Overall, exploration is in the middle of its biggest change. There is a move to the digitalization of our science. Some of the day-to-day tasks will undoubtedly change. There will be massive resistance, and we can hear the criticism now. But this change is inevitable. Our question is, what are the key elements that can be replaced? Or better yet, what are the key elements of being an explorer that can't be replaced? In our opinion, many of the personal skills will be irreplaceable. Dan Olberg is a personal friend of Steve and mine. Steve was Dan's manager for a few years, and Dan was my manager for a few more. And both Steve and I now find ourselves searching for someone like him. Non-explorers often say they don't understand explorers. In this episode, we attempt to crystallize an explorer by our conversation with Dan, an exploration geologist who speaks many languages, runs exploration programs in the developing world, and whose personal drive means he travels for work and pleasure. Dan and his wife have the personal stories and photo album that will taunt many of us. So why are we talking to Dan? Because he epitomizes a drive that explorers have and need. Join us as we continue our journey to find what motivates us, what drives us, and ultimately what inspires us to explore. We had wanted to do this interview live, but staying in the theme of this episode, Dan was somewhere in the middle of Africa. So we had to do this interview over the internet. And because many places in Africa don't have the best internet, there is an effect on the sound quality in parts. We apologize for that, but I hope you can still get a sense of our conversation with Dan.
You live an extraordinary life. You lived FIFO for a long time and the same roster for a long time, and you and your wife make that work. In fact, you make it work by travelling as well and a lot of your off time. So can we just unpack this sort of FIFO thing?
At university, I had met my future wife, and she was a New Zealander, so I decided to make the move to New Zealand. And once I was living in New Zealand in the mid-'90s, I started looking for work overseas and very quickly found opportunities in Indonesia. And really that was the start of my kind of international career, which has taken me around a lot of the globe and definitely around the Pacific Rim. At that point, I haven't really looked back. I've been working FIFO roster, fly in, fly out of, countries all over the world ever since then. So really for the past 20 odd years, it's just been a continuous stream of fly in, fly out to 5 different continents.
Can you talk a little bit about that lifestyle of being on a roster?
FIFO is the only thing I know. I've always known that I never wanted to go to an office in the city 5 days a week and have the weekends off. It just never appealed to me, and FIFO has always had a great appeal. I like the aspects of it that you actually get a long period of time at work where you can actually really get into the work in a big way and get things done. And then you have a good chunk of time off, allows you to really spend some time and do the things you like to do or you love to do. And for me, that time off is generally about travels. And I actually spend very little time at my home, wherever that might be, whether it was in New Zealand or now Cape Town. I end up spending very little time there. And most of my time is spent with my wife out traveling, around New Zealand, around South Africa, and around the world in general. And it's it's a lifestyle that we both just love. I just couldn't imagine now going back to a normal 5 day a week job where you didn't get that, where you only got one chance a year to travel basically during some annual leave or something. It'd be kind of like being sent to prison for me. I just I love the freedom it allows for travel and just really getting away from work. Clears your head and you realize what the important things are in life, and it's not all about work. There are other things. It's just a nice escape from real life, I guess.
So Dan, would it be correct to say that you live to work or you work to live?
It's a good question. I think more and more I'm working to live. I'm finding that I'm enjoying my time off more and more. and really looking forward at some point where I can just devote more of my time and energy to things I really love to do, things like travel and health and fitness and being with family and things like that. So I'm looking forward to a point in time where I can spend more time doing those things and less time actually at work. I mean, I do enjoy work a lot. I always have. It's always been fascinating for me and interesting. But I think after 25 years so far of doing this type of thing, I'm actually looking for, to tone it down a bit and really, focus on the things that have become more important in your life than just work. A job is a job, and there are definitely more important things than the job.
So do you think your wife shares the same love of travel that you?
Yeah, definitely. She loves to travel. If I ever suggested that we stayed at home during one of my breaks, I think I'd be shot. It's basically we've got to go out and do stuff. She's not going to sit around home while I'm there. I don't mind. I'm kind of more or less lived out of a suitcase for 25 years, and I actually don't mind that. It's a lot of fun, a lot of adventure, and she loves it as well. So we're a really good match.
Do you ever get sick of travel?
I haven't yet. A lot of people I talk to, even a lot of people who do the same kind of rosters and work that I do, they often complain about long trips and having to sit on a plane for 12 hours and sit around the airport. And I've never thought that. I've always been very excited about travel, and I look forward to sitting around the airport. I find them very exciting places full of people from all over the world. Going to all these different places, you look up at the arrivals and departures board, there's places that you've never heard of. It's like, where the hell is that? And it's just kind of a fun experience to do that. Long haul flights, I love. It's a time to kind of tune out and watch some movies, read some books, and just relax. I love staying in hotels, whether they're 5-star hotels or little B&Bs or, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of all part of the excitement, and I just haven't ever felt that I was sick of travel.
So how much of travel is escapism for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like living dual lives. It's like you have a work life, you have a group of colleagues and friends that you work with, and it's often. I mean, there's stress and hard work and frustrations and everything that goes along. With especially managing projects in the developing world. And when you're working a long roster and you're just like 100% effort into it, you really get totally kind of enveloped. And at some points it can feel like overwhelming, and you kind of almost forget that you have this other life that's outside of work. And when things become really stressful and frustrating, you just stop and think that, okay, well, you have this other life, which I guess it is like an escape, but which one is the real life? The life out traveling with your wife and visiting friends and family, or is your real life actually work? It's hard to determine which one's actually your real life and which one's the fantasy. But it is an escape. It's just nice to be able to turn off, to just go off to some country and sit on a beach, climb a volcano, just do whatever you want to do and not have to think about it at all.
Especially so you can send photos of volcanoes to Stephen Ahmed so they know for sure that they're going to be annoyed. So what happened after Indonesia?
Well, I was on my trip around the world with my wife. We spent a lot of time in South America. And while I was in South America, I made a lot of visits to various mining offices in Santiago, in Lima, in Mendoza. I just made contacts within that part of the world. And, as soon as we finished traveling, I was contacted by some of these people that I'd been talking with and basically was offered jobs in South America. And I ended up accepting a job in Peru, which took me into the Amazon basin on the Brazilian border of Peru.
So is that where your love of the jungles comes from?
Indonesia was all jungle work, and I got a lot of experience in the jungles in Indonesia, and I kind of had enough of jungles by the time I left Indonesia. However, because of my kind of long experience with jungle-based exploration work, that was why I was basically hired to go into Peru, into the Amazon basin.
Give us a little bit of a flavour of working in the Amazon. The bad stuff, the good stuff, the bad stuff in particular?
Yeah, well, I think the bad aspect of it was that when I started there, it wasn't a exploration program that I had personally planned or developed. I was basically thrown into kind of an existing plan, an existing program that was already underway, and I was just kind of taking another geologist's place. So I was basically thrown into the field. It's very remote. It takes several days to get there, down, traveling up the Amazon on a large boat, and then up a small tributary on a small motorboat, and then walking across the jungle with a backpack for 1 or 2 days, and finally you're in the exploration area. And there's no people around, there are no villages, there's no nothing. It's just very remote, pristine Amazon rainforest. And logistically, the program was not set up very well. There was no functional support line basically supporting that project in terms of getting food in and getting samples out. We made do by hiring hunters to basically hunt food for us, bush birds and tortoises and fish from the streams and things like that. So we basically lived off the land, myself and my team, for a number of weeks. Living out of a backpack, moving, pretty much day to day, sleeping in hammocks. Spent a lot of time being hungry, obviously, but we got the work done. And, once that hitch ended, I was able to kind of go back and recalibrate the program and basically get all the proper support we needed, including helicopter support and the proper manpower in the field to ensure that we kind of had a safe and productive work program where people weren't going hungry and we weren't forced to shoot bush pigs to survive.
You're a very disciplined guy, extremely disciplined, and working in the developing world requires a special type of person. It's a remarkable story of how disciplined you are to learn languages, continue to train and keep yourself fit and do your job. It doesn't seem like there's enough hours in the day to do all of those.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very difficult to find enough hours in the day for everything. But there's a lot of discipline involved there, and it's something. The discipline aspect of it is something that I've always had. Part of it's getting into some routines. Especially when you work in a FIFO roster, and that you can basically prioritize your day, around the things that you have to do and the things that are important to you. And I don't consider my health and fitness. I don't consider that something optional. That is something that I do every day as a priority. The health and fitness aspect is a priority that actually prioritizes my work. So I always try to make sure that I do that no matter what. Getting enough sleep and good nutrition, those type of things all come into that. Taking care of yourself over your job. The language side of things, since my first overseas posting in Indonesia, I've been studying languages. I guess in Indonesia it was a necessity. I was kind of thrown out into the bush, into the jungle of Indonesia with no other English, and I had to pick up the language. Fortunately, Indonesian is a fairly simple language, and I bought some dictionaries, some phrase books, and after a few months out in the bush, it was fairly easy to pick up, and I developed my language skills there over the course of about 7 years that I spent there. It's a lot of hard work, but in the end, it was actually one of the most rewarding aspects of working overseas or working in a foreign country that I found. It was amazing to be able to talk to people, not my own team, as well as villagers and other people you meet in the street, just being able to talk to them and communicate with them in their own language. I've seen so many times in all the countries I've worked where, the expats go into the country and make no attempt to really get into the culture and get into the language and really connect with their team and with the local people they work in. And they often struggle managerially. They really haven't made that connection with the people. And it is a big part of the management of teams, especially when you're managing teams in developing countries. A lot of them won't have English language skills, and it just lubricates things so much better if you can actually talk to your team in their language, and you just immediately have that connection. You build that rapport, and you actually feel like you're kind of part of a family. Such a rewarding aspect of the whole travel experience for me that I just kind of replicated that experience in every country that I've worked in.
So Dan, in your career, what are some of the things that you've found really challenging?
Well, I mean, there are physical challenges and there are other challenges. The other challenges involved in exploration generally have to do with the working environment that you're in, the political environment. In the developing world, you come up against a lot of the same things, country after country. And things like corruption is kind of ubiquitous in the developing world. Some countries are worse than others, but it's always a very big challenge to undertake an exploration program, kind of submitting to the corrupt practices that are pretty much everyday parts of the daily life of these countries. Obviously, a big challenge is the workforces, finding and developing competent personnel in these countries. It's a huge part of the job to basically build teams to hire people that have fairly limited knowledge, limited experience, and actually building that team up, building knowledge, building experience. In the end, producing a team that's efficient and functional, and actually producing geologists eventually become so competent that they're then able to actually go out and become expats themselves and work in other countries. So, it's a long process. You're looking at 5 to 10 years to kind of build really competent teams like that. But it's always rewarding to see some of the geologists that you've trained, from when they were first graduates, 10 years later, they're actually working overseas in other countries as expats. You can never look at going into a country as, a short-term prospect. You really have to put in some long-term effort to build teams and get them to the level where you can actually go out and make discoveries.
One of your really good personality traits is exactly that. I spent 2 years working with you in countries, and I think I learned a lot about how to socially handle an exploration project rather than just the technical side. I think in developing countries, that's probably the biggest challenge. Do you feel the same way? Do you think that the social aspect is sometimes more important in these projects rather than the pure technical side?
Well, if you want to get the most out of your team, yes, the social aspects are incredibly important. And, there are subtle differences from country to country and how you go about that. But you definitely do need to get that buy-in and definitely that involvement of the national workforce, into the programs, and in allowing them to make decisions, based on the information, the data that they basically have. An example of unsuccessful programs are when you get programs that are just totally dominated by expat and pretty much run from like a head office back in Australia or something, where all the decisions and all the data analysis and all the assay analysis, everything's done from the head office. And then direction is fed out into the field to the guys and say, you guys do this. And generally those programs aren't successful in the long run. My philosophy is that we basically have our decision making in the field, on the site, and we involve all of our people, not just a group of expats, but you involve your full team, your national geologists as well, and you look to them to make decisions based on the work that they're carrying out. I mean, often your national workforce, the guys are logging the drill holes, logging the RC holes, doing the mapping, doing the sampling. They actually have the best knowledge of the geology out there. And, to just kind of ignore that and have someone in head office make a decision is it's a folly.
I mean, I think this is a really good point. I remember you and I sitting in Tanzania, and one of the goals we gave ourselves was to make ourselves redundant by the end of the project. I think that's probably one of the best goals we've ever had in a project. It forces you to do it.
Yep, that's right. And that the Tanzania project I think it was a really good example, one of the most successful examples, I think, of that type of thing that I've ever come across. We were only there, I guess, a bit over a year, but in that time, the amount of progress and the amount of improvement that national team made is phenomenal. They went from being essentially sample monkeys to being guys who, could make decisions on projects and had become part of the management team there. So I thought, that was a great example of how it should work. And it actually happened there really quickly.
I had the pleasure of working with you, Dan, is country entry as part of project generation. Your skills at being able to work in different places and go into different places is extraordinary. You managed to go into a number of places and essentially get things set up. And all the things we've been talking about, I just feed directly into that as a skill set as well.
Yeah, that was, the years we spent together on the project generation side of things, in China, Mongolia, and then later in Africa. A lot of that work was new to me. It was, I'd previously been, very much field-oriented geologist and working on projects. However, it just seemed, I felt it came pretty natural to me, with my love for travel and adventure. It was something I actually really liked to do, and therefore it was fun for me. And it was actually probably, if I could look back on my career, that was the time that I had the most fun in my career. I didn't have too many, big responsibilities. I wasn't managing teams. It was just purely kind of technical work plus some people skills, and just going out and seeing new things, talking to people, collecting information, and putting everything together to eventually get the company interested in the country and get a team set up there. Those years that I did that work were definitely a highlight for me, and it was a kind of period in my career where I really had a lot of fun.
I'm just sort of trying to recall some stories from that time, and one of the funny ones that comes to mind was you were a bit of a fan of chilies, and I can remember being on a trip somewhere in Inner Mongolia where the locals that we were working with and in joint venture with had taken this to heart and gave you a big jar of chilies, which you actually sat underneath your chair in the bus that we would drive around in, and they would constantly fill it up. And this is a sizable jar of chilies, and Dan would just eat them like they're chips.
Yeah, that was really funny. I remember that well. They were always quite surprised at the amount of chilies. I remember it was so funny. They presented me that big giant, like a 1 gallon bottle of pickled chilies. And I remember putting it under the seat on the bus as we traveled around Inner Mongolia, and they carried it into the restaurants. We go to the restaurants and they plunk down the table. This big bottle of chilies.
It's like they thought that was the only thing you ate.
Yes.
So the other really amazing moment that I can remember, I remember you going into a lot of African countries, and one thing that comes to mind was the military coup in Madagascar. And I know you've started a few military coups.
Right. Firstly, I can neither confirm nor deny my involvement in said military coups. However, did seem to be a number of coups and similar types of events that kind of coincided, and I want to stress coincided with my visits to some of these other countries. In particular, Indonesia in the late 90s, the coup in the fall of Suharto, and coup in Mongolia in the late 2000s, and of course the coup in Madagascar in 2009. That's where I had nothing to do with it. Just coincidence. Yeah. It always makes for exciting times and good stories later on. I mean, in reality, I was, for the most part, you're never in any real danger in these situations. A lot of them are kind of internal politics, and there's always a chance you can get caught up in a crossfire or something like that. But provided you kind of keep away from the main action, generally it's not quite as bad as it looks on TV.
Yeah. The other thing that I got to see was you essentially going to Africa for the first time, and I can still vividly remember that you'd never worked in Africa and never really had any interest in it, and now it's become an obsession for you. I can remember telling you that you probably would be obsessed by the continent. Still remember the journey we did from Johannesburg to the Angolan border, one of those magic trips of your life that you can remember forever. Travelling through the Western Cape, Northwestern Cape, across the High Veld, across through the whole of Namibia. It was just a magic trip.
Yeah, it definitely was. That's you're absolutely right. That is, that's kind of it was a seminal trip where I did really start to fall in love with Africa. I never had a huge desire to work in Africa. I think most of that was I never really knew too much about it, and my first trip over there was basically in Madagascar, and then shortly after that, we made that epic trip across South Africa and Namibia, and that was where I basically realized what Africa was all about and what exploration in Africa was all about, and there was a lot of potential on this continent for discovery. Relatively mature compared to a lot of the other continents. great exploration environments, great geology, and very, very workable. And just the kind of the romance of it, the African sunsets and traipsing across the veld, the landscapes of Namibia, just all kind of came together. And I pretty much realized at that point that I wanted to spend a lot more time in Africa, and I'm really happy that I've been given that opportunity to work here in Africa and actually to relocate to Cape Town.
So I guess the other thing about all this travel throughout your whole life and constantly doing that is you have to give up things as well. There are sacrifices you make. Do you ever feel like you've had to sacrifice things as part of being a sort of traveling geologist?
Oh, yes, definitely. No, there's definitely a sacrifice that's made. One of the bigger sacrifices, obviously, is the it's the amount of time you spend away from your loved ones, your family and friends. For me, it's probably the most difficult part of it is just being away from family for weeks at a time. It's difficult, but I think the rewards of it kind of outweigh the sacrifice. Another aspect of a sacrifice is because I'm traveling all the time, I don't really have any friends like outside of work. All the friends I have are people who I've met through work. It's you guys, it's the people in the countries that I've worked in. I have a nice network of friends, but you don't have kind of those consistent friends that you're always spending time with all the time. I mean, all my friends now are basically long distance friends. We chat on Skype and we send emails and things like that, but we rarely ever spend time together, hang out, all that kind of stuff. So that's one aspect that is lacking. It's something that I miss from my my college days when you have a lot of people around all the time and you can hang out and have fun. Because I'm traveling, I can never really make those real strong connections with friends outside of work. So that's another kind of aspect of a sacrifice. Also, team sports. I used to love playing ice hockey and tennis and various other things where you need to have other people around to actually play. It's just very hard to do that when you're always on the road and traveling. And if you do go back and try to get involved in a game sometime, usually you just hurt yourself anyway because you haven't practiced for like 3 years. So you kind of have to convert to individual sports. You take up running and weightlifting and bicycling and hiking and things like that. Things that you can do kind of on your own, no matter where you are in the world. You can kind of do a lot of these things. So I've kind of had to focus on those type of things. So I haven't really kind of had that opportunity to play team sports for quite a number of years.
What would make you give up the fly-out job? Is there a sacrifice that would be too much?
I guess the only thing that would probably stop me from doing that is if it was hurting my relationship with my wife, I guess. I mean, if we were having some serious problems because of my time away, then I would definitely relook at the FIFO lifestyle. That would be probably the only thing that would really kind of prevent me from carrying on with the FIFO lifestyle. I like almost everything about the lifestyle, and my wife Tracy, she's we're living what we think is like a dream life. Unless that changes in the future, we're gonna continue on doing that.
So, how important is family to you?
Yeah, I mean, family is very important to me. So, my relationship with my wife is probably the number one thing of importance to me, and that always comes first, and it always comes above the job and above the FIFO schedule. So it is the most important thing to me. In addition to my wife, I've got family in the U.S. as well as family in New Zealand. We try to remain close to as well. Obviously with the distances involved, it's very difficult, but I still have a very strong relationship with all my family members and regularly travel to the U.S. and New Zealand to visit them. I rank family as the most important thing in my life.
The justification for that is that you moved to Invercargill, which is described as the asshole of the world.
Yes. I think it's a quote from Mick Jagger when the Rolling Stones went there in the 60s or 70s or whenever it was. I spent 20 years living in Invercargill, New Zealand. I loved it. I had a great time there. I loved traveling around New Zealand. New Zealand's my type of country with the outdoor opportunities and the people, and it was the best time of my life. Although the climate can be less than ideal.
That's an understatement.
It was actually a lot better than the climate where I had previously lived in Alaska. So it was actually a step up for me in terms of as far as climate goes. it wasn't that bad for me, and the fact that I wasn't really there that much helped as well. But I loved Invercargill, and I loved the people there. I love how it's so real, just a real New Zealand working class community. There's nothing pretentious about it. Just a lot of hardworking farmers and miners and people like that. I like those kind of people that work hard for a living, and I fit in pretty well there.
There is one important thing that you did learn from all that time, though, which is which rugby team to follow, Dan.
Yeah. So I'm a New Zealand citizen now, and one of the preconditions of getting my citizenship and my passport was I had to pledge allegiance to the All Blacks. If it ever comes out that I've talked negatively about the All Blacks or I've supported another team, then it's actually grounds for revoking my citizenship. So it's something I do have to be very careful of. I must admit, I have become a fan of the All Blacks during my time in New Zealand, and I definitely try to catch their games, their international tests whenever I can. I do feel proud when they win the World Cup time after time.
I think that's great, Dan. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it. We wanted some human stories of your life, the stories of what motivates you to be such a travelling geologist. That's excellent. Thanks very much.
Yeah, look, thanks for thinking of me. I guess when you spend a lot of time in these places and, you don't always receive a lot of feedback on kind of you as a person type of thing. And, I don't think what I do is that special, but, I guess from other people's perspectives, that's interesting and, definitely kind of out of the ordinary. But it's just me, it's just me doing what I like to do, basically.
For those that ask why we do what we do, out of the ordinary, that's Dan Olberg. A lust for travel is a key want in an explorer. We have Wanderlust, but it comes with a price. It comes with sacrifices. Is this a key skill in an explorer? A passion for travel, for the new? You bet. Let's see a machine do this.
It seems like people like us are kind of more and more rare in the industry, it seems, these days. You just don't really seem to get that same passion for, going out and traveling and seeing new things and meeting new people and immersing yourself in new cultures. It's just doesn't seem to be so popular these days amongst kind of up and coming people. So it's always great to talk to guys like you or kindred spirits and this sort of thing.